Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 21 has just been released, and we have seen the immaculate chapter that it is, as this chapter simply is a 10 out of 10. Ikimoto and Kijimoto have absolutely cooked, not only when it comes to the art and the powers that Sarada has, but the writing that ends up going behind it, complementing Sarada's character quite well and showing just how much she is growing in this chapter, as this chapter raises the bar of the things we can come to expect when it comes to the Boruto series. So let's start off with a review of the chapter with the cover page that we end up getting. And to be honest, this is my favorite cover page that we have ever received in the Boruto series. I don't know if I'm starting a little too hot with some of the takes that I have, but this chapter cover is absolutely amazing. We have the red background, and then we have these little black vortexes, and there's the black stains that are appearing at the background. One that is quite prominent looks like a spear, and it comes to go back and link to the ability that Sarada ends up displaying in this chapter, as she absolutely ends up going crazy in this chapter. Sarada is in a beautiful pose in my opinion, and we can still see that she has the Mangekyo Sharingan that is active. The side text says, "In the land of despair, the ominous star floats." And we have additional text saying, "While chasing down Ryu, Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan awakens." This is essentially some of the extra piece of information that we end up getting with these types of translations. If you do end up seeing with the official manga, we don't get those side texts translated for some odd reason. That's why I love to read these translations, as they essentially give us everything. And the title for this chapter is Mangekyo Sharingan. This cover is a 10 out of 10, and there's not much more that I need to say. It's absolute perfection. So the chapter starts off with a flashback of Sarada, and this is what we end up seeing leading up to her using her abilities and setting up her personal writing. The side text to this page is saying, "Frequently recalled memories. Standing there is a girl earnestly aiming to become Hokage." And then we end up going back to this conversation that Sarada is having with Chocho. I don't know if I've seen Sarada and Chocho have this conversation in the manga, but this conversation reminisces some of the ones that they have had in the past between Chocho and Sarada in the anime. Essentially, Sarada is describing her goal of becoming a Hokage, just like the 7th Hokage. Chocho, who is quite simplistic with her personal goals and ambitions, as she just wants a good looking boyfriend, Sarada acknowledges this as something that she is freely able to do, but her goal is a little different. And then we cut to a Boruto who is essentially saying that he is going to be just like her father, somebody who plays a supporting role to the Hokage, and Boruto vows to protect her. Then we end up going back to a conversation between the likes of Sumire and Sarada, where essentially this conversation details the fact that Sumire had confessed to her in the past that she has feelings towards Boruto. We get a panel that also includes the likes of Naruto, who is essentially saying that everybody in the village is essentially his family. All of the citizens of Konoha are Naruto's family. And one thing that I'm noticing that is quite interesting, especially with this page and the page that we're about to see, is that Sarada is running. Sarada is consistently running, and we see her running throughout the village, and maybe this was the same scene of her running to go and save Boruto in which she had tried to, but I think it's a little different. She's essentially saying that she is not an amazing shinobi like the likes of Naruto or Sasuke, her father, and that's the reason why she cannot waste her time thinking about these pointless things. These pointless things include her love for Boruto, and that's why previously she was not really able to accept and express to Sumire that she has feelings for Boruto, as she is not allowing herself to waste time on what she believes are pointless emotions and pointless feelings. We go back to various key moments in Sarada's personal journey, one where Boruto ends up losing his eye in an attempt to protect her, and the Kawaki who is saying that she is essentially getting in the way. conversations now leading up to omnipotence, and where everything ended up changing, leading to Sarada awakening her Mangekyo Sharingan, due to the fact that everybody was pursuing the likes of Boruto, and she found that to be quite unjust, and it doesn't make sense, as it is always Boruto, and it is too cruel. This desire was the one she had in the beginning, leading up to Sarada awakening her Mangekyo Sharingan, which Sasuke describes as a mutation of the Sharingan that Uchihas possess. Awakening is triggered when you receive an extreme mental or emotional shock. We saw this with Sasuke, who awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan after the truth was revealed to him about Itachi and everything that happened. But through different things like Obito awakening his MS ability, we have a lot of people who have a misconception, believing that you have to see your friend die in order for you to end up awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, and Sasuke confirms this through this dialogue, making it clear that it is essentially a mental shock or an emotional one, which Sarada clearly had at that moment. And thus, because of that mental shock, the truth about what was going on was revealed to Sasuke in her eyes, as she ended up awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan. And Sarada was not made aware that she awakened it at that moment, but Sasuke is confident that when she does, not only will she be able to use it instinctively, but with that power, she will be a great source of hope for the likes of Boruto in dealing with everything that is happening right now. This is essentially setting up Sarada as someone who is going to eventually be able to oppose the likes of Ada, as this is what she literally did in awakening her Mangekyo Sharingan, a defiance towards the gods. And now we end up having Sasuke say, with her own abilities and what she can do with it. And this is what we're going to be able to see in these upcoming pages, as Sarada now has this MS ability, now is fully aware of the fact that she has her Mangekyo Sharingan and can now instinctively use it. And this is what we're seeing take place, going back to what we had last chapter, where Sarada has spawned this spear, which was sucking in Ryu's iron sand. Ryu again attempts to go and attack Sarada, but Sarada, she is clearly ore farming. This is what we're clearly seeing from Sarada. Sarada is ore farming this entire chapter, and people say that she is not a real Uchiha. I hope that this dispels any doubts, because the performance that we're about to see from Sarada in this instance essentially puts her at one of the top aura moments that we have seen in the Boruto series so far, including everything that we have seen. It is number one, and it actually might not be close to anything we do see. Boruto will probably come up with something epic in the future, but what I'm seeing in this chapter is absolutely crazy. So the spear is absorbing Ryu's iron sand. So Ryu ends up acknowledging that this black sphere is absorbing the iron sand, and we have a Sarada who is telling Mitsuki to take care of Yado and Ayara and also focus on protecting himself. This is essentially a 1v1 between the likes of Ryu and Sarada, and this is why I'm saying it is quite important due to all of the scaling that we know for Ryu so far, and especially the Senju. It's not like somebody is helping Sarada fight versus Ryu. This is Sarada doing it by herself. So all of the scaling that we're about to see applies to Sarada and Sarada alone. Mitsuki essentially acknowledges the fact that she has the Mangekyo Sharingan, which Sarada also does, saying to Mitsuki, "Don't worry, I just awakened this power, but I already understand it fundamentally." But as she is saying that, Ryu is also coming up with a countermeasure, and due to the fact that we have a sphere that is sucking in his iron sand, he positions the iron sand in a manner where the sphere is still going to absorb the iron sand, however it would hit Sarada in the process. However, this doesn't actually end up taking place, as what does instead is the sphere ends up sucking in the iron sand at a different location. And to be 100% honest, this is a solid plan from Ryu. I'm not going to say that Ryu is stupid in doing so, because this is clearly a smart plan. He thought about it quickly, found a way in which he could bypass Sarada's ability, however, it simply didn't work, as instead of there just being one, there are actually multiple spheres, and in fact, there are actually 4, and Sarada has strategically placed them in a manner where she is able to suck in the iron sand from a location where the direction in which Ryu's iron sand is absorbed wouldn't end up hitting Sarada. And Sarada hasn't said a word ever since we had a Ryu that is clearly panicking due to everything that he has saw, especially with the fact that there are now 4 spheres, and his biggest method of dealing with people with his iron sand has effectively been patched. And not only has his new method been patched, he himself as an entity is about to be patched, as we see him floating, being sucked in to one of those black spheres. But he isn't the only one floating that I can see, as there is actually Sarada who is floating too. And all of this is done with a lot of aura, with a lot of composure, and this is what I love to see from Sarada here. There's no need to talk too much, especially when you are showcasing your powers to this extent. And we have a Ryu who is clearly confused, and everybody who is looking at this doesn't understand what is happening, but Sarada does. And Ryu, in an attempt to stop this pull from being able to work, is trying to use his iron sand as a way to cleave himself or to attach himself to the ground, which ends up getting Mitsuki to notice that there is a gravity proponent to those black spheres, which allows Sarada to be able to suck Ryu and put him in that direction. And this is where we get more of a description of those powers. Mitsuki says that sphere is generating gravity. Ryu and his iron sand, as well as Sarada herself, are being affected by it. Mi and Ayara, as well as the surrounding life forms, remain unaffected by the gravity. This basically means that she is choosing. Sarada is choosing the target, and this power is absolutely crazy, as Ryu says that his body is being sucked in to that sphere. And this is actually crazy, because not only are we seeing Sarada effectively break into this Otsutsuki level tier, and I'll definitely explain it in a future video. We'll mostly focus on the narrative in this video. However, with Otsutsukis, one thing that is quite noticeable about Otsutsukis is the fact that they can fly, and for her to be able to fly with this ability, I just feel like it is showing to us visually how she is stepping in that domain of the gods, essentially stepping onto that Otsutsuki level tier. And Sarada says something beautiful. For a long time, I chose to turn away. My goal of becoming the Hokage felt so far away, so I became impatient. For every calamity that occurred, I was always unable to do anything. I didn't want to admit that I was actually powerless. I was scared to face that reality, so I turned away from it. Preze's feelings, basically Sumire, the unrest in my heart, what I actually thought about Boruto. I thought all of that was just weakness, so I denied it. I also knew I was denying this power I kept hidden. So this is very interesting right here, because there is definitely on one hand the fact that she didn't know that she had the Mangekyo Sharingan and she had awakened it. However, she knew that she had that power within her. However, she needed to get rid of those shackles of doubt, and her being hypercritical about her actual effects on various different matters that were happening on the village. However, when she was able to accept the fact of where she was at the current moment, her feelings towards Boruto, and everything that is happening with Sumire, she is also able to accept that hidden power within her. And that's why she is now aware of the fact that she has awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. But we have a Ryu who says, "Quit babbling. What's up with all the emo girl talk?" And this is why Ryu is always the go for me. You know, he always keeps it real. Low-key, he always keeps it real with whatever he is thinking, and he always figures out a way to say something slick, even though this might be his last time. As what we do end up seeing take place is the fact that Ryu is actually sucked into that sphere, and now he essentially cannot move. And basically Sarada is looking down on him. And this is crazy though, bruh. This is actually crazy because it looks like a crucifixion. Both hands spread, he can't move at all, and Sarada is simply looking down on him with pity and sorrow. That's absolutely disrespectful. And if this was me, especially after I was toying with them multiple times like Ryu was doing, and now I find myself in this sort of predicament, I really couldn't take that type of disrespect. And Sarada says something that is so epic in my opinion with what ends up happening with Ryu. But first we have a Ryu who ends up acknowledging the fact that the pulling force has become stronger, and it is basically synonymous with the fact that the sphere has also become bigger. One thing I do want to know here is that maybe the pulling force that Sarada has with these spheres ends up growing with how big Sarada ends up deciding to make that sphere. And it really would be crazy to see that maybe she can make a planetary level sphere where the sphere itself ends up being so big, ends up being as big as a planet, thus having gravitational powers as strong as a planet would. But Sarada says, I won't turn away anymore. If you run away from yourself, you can't confront the truths in front of you. You can't save a single person. And as Sarada is basically explaining why it's not good to run away, we have a Ryu who ends up attempting to run away himself. I found that to be super cool and funny as Ryu ends up trying to run away, and we have a Jiro who doesn't even look at Ryu. Why are they just oral farming? That's my question. Why are they doing, like, we clearly know that you can see him, why not turn back and grab? Jiro basically let this happen to Ryu. He could at least try to reach in, or maybe Jiro just knew that he was cooked at this moment and there's no saving him, so let me just oral farm. It could have been that, and I don't blame him for doing that. But the gravitational force is so strong that at this moment he can't even lift a finger. We know that before he was at least able to move, although it wasn't that well. But now, due to the increase in the size of the sphere, he is no longer able to move at all. And Sarada continues by saying, becoming Hokage is my dream, so first I gotta start with accepting myself. And this line has so many different meanings, and I'll be diving deep onto Sarada's character analysis, just seeing how far she has grown over these recent chapters, and her reaching this peak as we see in her character, where her stating that she has to start with accepting herself. We will dive deep onto that in a different video. However, for now, we can clearly just admire the beautiful writing, and later on, we'll get a full analysis. But this is where we see arguably the greatest panel that Ikimoto has ever made. And yeah, it pretty much is, as she has her Mangekyo Sharingan in this elegant form, this elegant pose that we see Sarada display. And this the first vibes it gave off to me, Gojo in that pose of the honored one. This is basically Sarada's interpretation of that, as she is absolutely going crazy. We have the sign of her Tomoes, which we are seeing being displayed, and Sarada has this elegant pose with the other spears that are right next to her. And this pose to me is absolutely it, because let's even just dissect it a little further. So we have one hand of Sarada that is going up, or it's pointing up, and we have another hand that is pointing down. And I believe that one hand is clearly her elevating herself in the sense that she is allowing herself to float in the air, and the other one is that of putting Ryu down. Obviously Ryu is still in the air, but as we saw in that different pose, Sarada is clearly a lot higher. So one is her using the powers to draw her higher, and one is using the powers to draw Ryu lower. Mangekyo Sharingan, or Hirume. And this is where we see Ryu essentially being wrapped up in this vortex sphere, and we have her bleeding with her right eye. And then Ryu is gone, just that quick and just that simply. Ryu has been turned into dust, with a Sarada who is still floating in the air, but after that ends up losing consciousness, and Mitsuki ends up catching her. We get information stating that she lost consciousness, which is most likely due to the fact that she depleted her chakra. We do have to keep in mind that on top of the fact that she's using the Mangekyo Sharingan's abilities for the first time, she did end up fighting Ryu before and used up a lot of abilities. And we also have to mention the fact that unlike Ryu, Sarada is not immortal, so she is not going to keep coming back with more and more energy, like a Ryu who is connected to the Divine Tree, and whenever he gets injured, just like we saw with Hidari, he can end up going back to that place and get healed up. And now we have the confirmation from Ida herself that Ryu has been defeated. And Kashin Koji says that she has successfully awakened that ability, which was essentially the most important outcome of this battle. And it's just like I've said in previous videos, it was quite clear that this was what they were doing, especially with the fact that they picked out Sarada. And we already knew that Sarada had the Mangekyo, and this is essentially the perfect way for her to do so. However, now we go to a grim part of the chapter, which is essentially dealing with the fact of Yado basically being dead, as it is a shame for Yado that she won't end up living. And then we have Kashin Koji, who says it can't be helped. Her sacrifice made great contributions to the overall outcome. It was not made in vain. And we have a Boruto that clearly does not like this sort of attitude, and this does end up establishing a clear divide in philosophies between Kashin Koji and Boruto, and we'll definitely have to dive in a little bit deeper on that in a future video. Boruto asked Kashin Koji to simply be honest, saying, "Answer me truthfully, was there a future where everyone lived and Sarada still awakened her power?" Kashin Koji says, "At the very least, I'll say this. If you had attempted to provide backup, Sarada would not have awakened her power." Then Boruto said, "So you knew and didn't say anything about it. You said nothing to me about Yado ending up like this." And Kashin Koji says, "I judged there was no reason to tell you, and right now you're basically proving my points." And this is basically something that we have been seeing slowly be hinted towards, the fact that there's a definite disconnect in Boruto and Kashin Koji's philosophies and what exactly they're trying to lead up to, where Boruto ends up asking Kashin Koji a critical question. What's happening to Konohamaru? Can he win against Masturi? And Kashin Koji doesn't answer. And Boruto continues by saying, "I asked you a question." Kashin Koji tells Boruto to listen. Jiro has shared senses with the other Senju currently on the battlefield. And I wanted to point towards this because I did end up making a video explicitly dissecting this part, saying that the reason why Jiro was crying was not because their emotions are linked, it was simply due to the fact that he could see what was taking on in the battlefield. And this is essentially what Kashin Koji is saying right here, so I just want to let you know. But he continues by saying, if you show yourself in front of Matsuri, you will immediately be noticed by Jiro, and you'll be killed. I saw several patterns with that conclusion. But Boruto clearly doesn't listen, as it appears like it was actually meant for Konohamaru to get devoured. And you know I'm always with you, Boruto. However, you should have let Konohamaru get devoured. I was tired of seeing him, you feel me? We end up seeing Boruto use the flying Raijin and a piece of the metal that Mitsuki ended up dropping a couple chapters back so that Boruto could end up teleporting. He uses that, and in a second, in a flash, without Kashin Koji being able to react and Matsuri being able to say Boruto in a complete sentence, she is gone and taken care of. However, Kashin Koji is clearly terrified as he is sweating, and he says, "That hardhead brat, does he really want to make all our efforts for naught?" And Jiro, who is a little pissed, I'm not gonna lie, look at Jiro's face. I've never seen Jiro show this expression before. He is showing straight teeth, grinning. He is ready to take down Boruto, and he says, "So you have appeared, Otsutsuki Boruto." And what's quite interesting is the side text says, Boruto relentlessly cuts through the future, even if it invites his own death. So, will Boruto end up dying? This is what we're currently seeing, and it's definitely possible that Boruto dies. Maybe Momoshiki ends up taking over. That's probably something I want to see take place. But we know that obviously in the end, Boruto does end up surviving or figuring out a way to come back. But one thing I do want to wrap up the video discussing is whether Kashin Koji end up being devoured by Matsuri would have changed some dynamics in the Senju, or would have changed something to lead towards a better outcome, instead of it being that Boruto never went to the battlefield and thus Boruto wasn't killed. Would Konohamaru being devoured have affected things on a different level and led to a better future due to the changes that would happen to Matsuri? This is a discussion that we clearly won't ever know the answer to, or maybe Kashin Koji will reveal the answer to this question in the future. But this is the chapter that we have right here, an absolutely amazing chapter, a 10 out of 10, and if you don't think it's a 10 out of 10, go read it again. And if after that you think it's a 9 out of 10, go read it again until it becomes a 10 out of 10 to you, because this chapter was absolute perfection. So let me know your thoughts, comments, and concerns. A lot of analysis videos will be coming up, and if you have some cool ideas or cool analysis that you want to point out, definitely let me know in the comment section below. It's been your boy Dynasty, and I'm out, bruh.